that blade works.
Hey, what is up, you guys? It's Silver Fang, and today I'm back with another video. So today I'm gonna be covering Shakespeare, and this is not like one of those servants that's like really important, like really powerful, or even a fighter. He's not even a fighter, so he's a caster. But what I am interested in is, though, like, I'm wondering, what was it that he do to be considered a heroic spirit? Like, was it just because of his books, his poems? Like, was that why? Like, I don't know. So I'm pretty interested to see what Annie News has to say about him. Again, he's not a fighter, so it's really weird. He does have like some kind of mental control and whatnot, but yeah, like, I don't know, like, to be honest, when I chose to do this one, it was just to cover him, like, to kind of like to get him out of the way, I guess. But it wasn't really like a servant that I was like really looking forward to doing. But you know, it is what it is. Let's cover Shakespeare. Hopefully his stuff is like, maybe it's pretty interesting. Maybe it will surprise me. Maybe I will like him a lot. I don't know. But yeah, let's see what I have to say after the video. But before I get started with the video, though, I want to share something interesting with you guys, and it's something I've been saying in my past videos, which is that I found out that 89.2% of the people who watch my videos don't subscribe to my channel. And I was really surprised when I found that out. And I don't think that people are not subscribing because they don't like my content. I'm honestly just thinking they forget, because they keep coming back. So if you like my content, if you like what I do, please help me out and change that number, and please hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. It'll help me out a lot. And yeah, like, it's a pretty bad number, man. Like, I wish I can drop that down to, like, I don't know, like at least 50%. Like, that's horrible. 89.2, almost 90%. That's insane. So yeah, please help me out. Please hit that subscribe button. It'll really help me out a lot, and I will really appreciate it. If you guys want to know how I'm doing it in Fate the Fate Grand Order, the mobile game, please go ahead, follow me on my Instagram. I'm posting like a whole bunch of stuff about the game. I'm posting ascensions, summons, missions, upgrades, all of that good stuff. So please go ahead, follow me on my Instagram. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the video.
So, after I pitifully begged you all to vote for the greatest playwright in history, we actually beat out Atalanta and won the vote with like 40-something%. So good job to us, but to be honest, I really thought that by doing some more research into his character, I'd find out more about his usefulness in the war. But after glancing over some of his abilities, he really is quite useless in almost every aspect. However, it was mentioned twice in episode 22 that Castor would pose the biggest threat to Ruler. So hopefully this episode will shed some light on what they were talking about, since Assassin's words did seem as a fairly dire warning. But as always, let's first talk about the Caster class in general, since this is the first Caster we've covered in the series. The Caster is another one of the cavalry classes known for being a magus and the heroic spirit of spells and sorcery. As you'd expect, they're usually fairly skilled at magic, which is interesting for Shakespeare's case because he can barely use magic. So let's consider him an exception to the case, and I'll explain why soon. But in order to even be considered for the Caster class, you have to be a top-rate mage, an absolute master of sorcery. You basically gotta be Harry Potter. Or Voldemort, I think either would qualify. Especially with the part about casters having a severe lack of any physical strength, or really any other attribute other than magecraft. But since the caster really only specializes in one area, they're widely considered to be the weakest of the 7 classes, especially since most of the other classes have some form of magic resistance. If that's the case though, then how exactly was Shakespeare summoned as the caster of Red if he can't even cast a spell? Well, Shakespeare was considered to be a magician in his own right because of his numerous works of English literature that created masterful illusions through the theater rather than through magic. Essentially, the sense of escapism that his stories provided from reality were on par with illusions that could be created through magic. It was through these works that he himself lived as a legend through the ages as the creator of some of the greatest stories of our time. And that poses a problem for anyone who's unlucky enough to summon him as their servant. A legend can only alter a servant's abilities so much, and normally it grants them powers in the form of their noble phantasms. So aside from Shakespeare's single noble phantasm and a few class and personal skills, well, how should I put this? In a normal Holy Grail war, he'd be useless as shit. Now, don't get all mad because I may have just dissed your favorite servant. Luckily for you, this isn't a normal Holy Grail war. Unfortunately though, it's a sad truth to take in, but I'll talk more about it when I get to his abilities. First, even though I'm sure you're all well aware of who he was back when he was alive, I still gotta talk a little bit about him. I know a majority of us would have studied his works during our boring English classes at school, which, by the way, are as useless as you think they are. But that's aside from the point. What I'm trying to get at is we only know him through his stories like Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet. But how many of us really know the man behind the name? Don't worry, this isn't school though, so I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. Born in the year 1564 in Stratford, England, William Shakespeare's story is not a tale of tragedy like so many of the other servants that we've come across. It's more like a story of success. At around the age of 19, Shakespeare started his career as an actor in London for a company called The King's Men. It wasn't until shortly after that he began to write his own scripts, which then became performances for the London stage. It only took a few for his name to become known, but once it did, it spread like wildfire. It even made some of his colleagues jealous enough to write their scripts that pretty much called Shakespeare out for being a phony playwright since he never attended university. To put it as relevant as I can, it was pretty much the 16th century version of YouTube diss tracks. But a little bit of shade didn't stop Shakespeare from taking the world by storm. Now, I could talk about each of his works and how they progressed his career, but to be honest, I'd probably put you and myself to sleep just talking about it. So instead, let's talk about his motives in the show. Considering Fate Apocrypha's large cast, it's hard to give each one the screen time to fully explain their purpose in the show. They can conveniently showcase it through their wish for the Grail, but even Shakespeare said that he himself has no desire for such, but rather just wants to witness and document the unfolding of a grand story. So what exactly does he mean by that? He sets himself aside from the other servants and places himself as a different role of what can only be described as the narrator or the observer. It's because he considers himself as such that he only gives his regards to those who he thinks are the protagonists. And it's pretty easy to spot who they are considering that we know who they are. But in case you don't pay attention, he's been limiting his interactions to the two rulers, a few of the servants, and he's expressed an interest in Sieg, but that's about it. Everyone else he just dismisses as mere side characters and pays them no mind. The thing about Shakespeare though is that he'll do anything to have the story turn out the way that he envisioned. And since his most popular works are tragedies, he definitely enjoys seeing Shiro's story end in a similar manner, rather than with the boring sought-after salvation of mankind.
Gotcha.
So it'd be interesting to see how his particular story reaches its conclusion, since he's kind of like a third party with ulterior motives from the other two. I guess we'll just have to wait and see in episode 23 though. Now let's talk about what he's actually capable of. I'm sure plenty of you already saw him use his noble phantasm on Berserker, so you should have an idea of what exactly it does.
It's like mental.
It's called First Folio. When the curtain rises, the applause shall be as 10,000 thunders. Put simply, it's the ultimate play. Shakespeare researches into his opponent's true identity and uses shadow actors and illusions to recreate scenes from their lives. It's referred to as an anti-heart noble phantasm because it doesn't do any physical damage, but is instead used to break the victim's mind. His shadow actors follow a set script that he himself wrote as people from the target's past life. They mock the target with well thought out lines that are supposed to root out traumas that cause severe amounts of mental anguish. These shadow actors aren't autonomous though, and can only follow the laid out script. So if a response seems off to the target, they can figure out that it's just an illusion. However, considering Shakespeare is the greatest playwright in history, it's very hard to realize that it truly is an illusion. And even if they did, it takes a tremendous amount of willpower to just break out of the spell. The realism of the play is increased even further when in the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, because it allows some of the shadow actors to give varied responses depending on the target's actions. So they begin to display low levels of intelligence with their ability to react in the play rather than simply follow the script. But as I said, even if it is determined to be an illusion, it's not so easily broken and the target may still have to endure till the end of the script. Shakespeare
Gotcha.
also has a fair number of personal skills. The first isn't quite useful in a fight, but it's extremely useful for keeping himself alive. It's called self-preservation, and it basically keeps him away from pretty much all harm as long as he provides some form of protection for his master. I'm not entirely sure how this works, but I guess it allows him to evade having to confront any servant when the time comes, which is pretty handy for helping him maintain his position as the observer. Then he's got what's called the King's Men, cleverly named after the acting company I mentioned that he worked for. This is his cast of shadow actors. They can be summoned without the activation of his noble phantasm. Although they don't fight, they can still take the form of the people from the target's past lives and still mess with their head. And just as you'd expect, they can only say what Shakespeare writes for them. So I guess they're pretty good at making for a diversion or a stalling tactic, but other than incapacitating someone for a little bit, it's not really viable when in a fight to the death. And the final skill that he has is called Enchant, the literary masterpiece endowment. We actually saw him use this on Shiro's sword, which we saw got pointed out to be a noble phantasm. Now, it could have been easily misunderstood that Shiro, being a ruler in the past, could have a sword as a noble phantasm. But that was actually an item that Shakespeare enchanted to become a noble phantasm. Servants who are known for being notable writers are able to essentially turn any item or weapon into a noble phantasm by adding functions to it that would exceed the item's natural limits.
Gotcha.
All he has to do is write about it and add the details that he wants, which in Shiro's case was to make his sword stronger by stating that it could cut through anything and receive all attacks. Of course, it was written in greater detail, but you get the gist. The more creative that the literary expression is, the stronger the effects are on the item. All these skills are pretty much used to make the fight more convenient for the master, because as you now know, Shakespeare tends to avoid all conflict.
He's pretty much
Instead,
like a support.
he strengthens his master and lets him do the fighting instead. But realistically, if his master wasn't Shiro, a master wouldn't stand a chance against a servant. But yeah, that's everything that you really need to know about the greatest writer in history.
We've seen a few.
I never thought that Shakespeare would be a character to make an appearance in Fate, but it was a wonderful surprise when I first found out. He's a good change of character from the typical heroic spirits, not only the way that he fits into the Holy Grail War, but also the way that he fights and survives. The man just wants to witness the greatest story of time. But it's also said that since he was an actor, he can't help but try to take the spotlight sometimes and become the main protagonist of the story. So that may be something worth noting when watching episode 23. But I'll leave it at that, and thank you all for watching this video. Also, if you want to help decide which servant I cover next, then go vote in the poll under the community section. But until next time, ciao!
Okay, guys, so that was Shakespeare, and yeah, he was pretty much as useless in a fight as I thought he was. He does have some interesting abilities though, but none of them are combat based. Pretty much if you summon this guy, he's like a support character for you. So if the master who summons him unfortunately is not good at combat, then they're pretty much screwed. If there are highly skilled at combat, like we seen a few, like CAREE, Kotomine, also the professor, like Shiro's professor from Unlimited Blade Works, he was also pretty damn good at hand-to-hand combat. And we did see Medea upgrade his fist and his legs and whatnot, so that he was able to keep up with servants. And I remember distinctly him punching Saber so hard, like she went like through a gas station. Like, so there are some servants out there. Granted, Saber was handicapped by being summoned by Shiro and whatnot, but there are some masters who are able to go toe to toe with servants, especially if they have some sort of support from their servant. Considering that this guy can pretty much create noble phantasms on the fly, if the right master summons him, they might have a chance. Granted, I don't think a master would be skilled enough, even with enhancements, to like defeat all 7 servants and you know and whatnot. But if he does play it smart, you could possibly win a Grail War, because listen, this guy has all the skills to be in the last 2. Like, he has the skills to avoid conflict completely. So it is possible for him to be the like within the last two. And if somehow, some way, with his help, a master is good enough at fighting, he might win some Grail Wars depending on the master and who the master is. I mean, it's possible. It's light, but it is possible. But yeah, like, but in a fight, he's pretty much useless. His Noble Phantasm could, I'm guessing it could work more like of a distraction, again, trying to get away from conflict, a distraction or stall tactic, something along those lines. But yeah, like, when it comes to a fight to the death, like, this servant, I don't think is beating anybody, to be honest. But yeah, I don't have too much to say about this guy. Like, his story was like as really underwhelming. I'm sorry if this guy's your favorite, but like, it's not, he's not like my cup of tea, you know. So like, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this guy. Again, to end this on a high note, if he gets the right master, it is possible. Like, if he gets the right master and the right servants are summoned, he could possibly win 1 or 2 Grail Wars, maybe. I don't know. It is definitely a possibility, just because of his skills. Just like, he's potentially, once he's summoned, if he wants to be, like, if he summons in a regular Grail War, he pretty much has the skill to be within the last 2, possibly. He has the skills to do that, to stay under the radar and completely stall until the last 2. And again, if some way, somehow, and this one point that I didn't think about as well, he has the skills to be last 2. And when it comes to master, like, he can enhance his master to a point that the master may not have an easy time against the servant, but he might be able to take out the other master. For example, right? I'll give you an example, something that just got to me. Let's say he's summoning a Grail War, some way, somehow, he is last 2, right? He is last 2, which is, again, it's not that hard considering he has the skills for it. Okay, so this last 2, he could create his master in weapon or a Noble Phantasm. Like, let's say he can create his master a bow that is said, strike whatever target you envision in your mind, meaning the last master. And this arrow will never, here's an arrow that will never miss. Something along those lines of that. Master dead. Possibly, like, it's possible. It's possible. You just need to he just needs to have the right master, you know? But he could possibly win some Grail Wars. Can he beat any servants? Maybe not. Probably not. But yeah, he can't even do magic, which is crazy because it's the requirement of a caster class. But hey, here you go, an exception to the rule. But yeah, like, I don't have too much to say about this guy, so thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As I said in the beginning of the video, please subscribe to the channel. Please, it will really help me out a lot. Please hit that like button. If there's anything interesting that you think I should know about this guy, let me know in the comment section below. I really appreciate it. And that's pretty much it, guys. As I always say, have a nice day and catch you guys in the next one.